Tonight, breaking news, New South Wales COVID case numbers continue to rise, with Greater Sydney set to continue their lockdown for potentially many more weeks, but plenty of people aren't happy, with protests calling for the restrictions to end. It's Sunday the 25th of July, you're watching 6 News also tonight.
Are you an absent leader?
No.
The Morrison government faces more criticism over how it's handled the vaccine rollout and the latest outbreak. We'll speak live to Sue Fricky from Voices of Kooyong to get her thoughts. And the winner is Brisbane 2032. The Olympics will be heading down under. Our reporter is on the ground with the latest reaction from Australia's third Olympic city as the games kick off overseas. Plus, we'll explain the tough rules the IOC has for TV networks not given the Tokyo 2020 rights.
It's very great to have this Olympic here in Brisbane. Like, for me, this is very new. Like, to have the Olympics here in Australia and in Brisbane and our city. Like, this is the best.
Good evening. The situation in New South Wales is continuing to develop even as we go to air tonight. Case numbers haven't stopped rising despite earlier hopes from authorities, and now it seems certain that Greater Sydney's lockdown will continue for many more weeks. A lot of these cases are also in the community, and despite constant calls from authorities, people of all ages are still hesitant to get vaccinated, especially with AstraZeneca, because of that rare risk of getting a blood clot. Senior reporter Darby Travers begins our coverage.
New South Wales has recorded 141 new locally acquired COVID-19 cases in the 24 hours until 8 p.m. last night, slightly less than the 163 recorded yesterday. Of that, authorities say 87 are linked to a known case or cluster, 71 are household contacts, 16 are close contacts, while the source of infection for the 54 is currently under investigation. 65 were in isolation throughout their entire infectious period. Up to 62 were infectious in the community, and the source of infection for 14 is unknown. Authorities say there have been 2 new COVID-related deaths, a woman in her 30s and a woman in her 70s who both died at separate hospitals. On a more positive note, over 102,000 tests were completed in the last 24 hours, which is a new record for the state. Premier Gladys Berejiklian says the violent scenes at yesterday's protest breaks her heart and has labelled the scenes utterly disgusting after thousands protested against the lockdown. Here's some of what was captured yesterday. One incident that saw a lot of attention was a police horse allegedly being punched, with 2 men reportedly charged, including one in a free speech singlet. But this footage of the alleged punch has sparked a conversation, with some saying it proves the man only pushed the horse away with a clenched fist. New South Wales Police later took to their Facebook page to confirm the animal was uninjured.
New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has faced criticism after calling for other states to effectively give up their vaccine doses so that residents in COVID-hit Sydney can have them. WA Premier Mark McGowan was one of those people, calling on authorities interstate to end what he described as half-baked measures and declined to give them any extra jabs. And an old clip from early June shows Ms Berejiklian saying she wouldn't give out New South Wales doses to Victoria.
Oh, I heard that Victoria wants some of our Pfizer vaccines. They're not getting it.
No, I can't.
Good.
The feds are giving them more anyway.
Okay, so they're not coming from New South Wales.
No, the federal government has from last week given them more AstraZeneca, I think. But
why does everyone look to us to save their own stupid decisions?
I can't comment on that.
Interstate, meanwhile, both the Victorian and South Australian lockdowns are on track to end as planned, but tough restrictions are expected to remain for weeks. Daniel Andrews is likely to confirm that mask restrictions and caps on public and private gatherings will stay in place, while in SA, Premier Stephen Marshall is expected to say the same. But with millions in lockdown across the country, there still is a lot of anger from some who feel their freedoms are being taken away and that the measures in place are too heavy-handed. Reporter Lincoln Holmes has more.
As case numbers in New South Wales continue to rise, both Victoria and South Australia are set to end their lockdown as planned early next week.
We have businesses crying for JobKeeper to be reinstated, and there's growing criticism that you're an absent leader and that you're passing the buck. Is that true, Prime Minister? Are you an absent leader?
No.
South Australia has only recorded a few cases since going into lockdown, and Victoria's cases are beginning to go down. Both states are set to ease their restrictions on Tuesday.
I recall hearing Professor Peter Doherty speak about the choices that we all face here in Victoria, indeed here in Australia. You're either on the side of the virus or you're on the side of humanity. You can't be on both.
But even if all goes to plan, a number of restrictions are set to remain. It's believed the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews will confirm that mask wearing and limits on private and public gatherings will continue, though potentially slightly eased. One of the latest restrictions that could be lifted is wearing masks on public transport, with it being mandatory even when Victoria was entirely COVID-19 free. Thousands of anti-lockdown protesters were yesterday seen in Melbourne's CBD calling for the Premier to be sacked, though those scenes were less chaotic than what happened in New South Wales, as millions of residents raced on edge in their homes.
It seemed to me that they were protesting about a whole lot of things yesterday, not just coronavirus, but, the global world order and vaccines and all sorts of different things. That is self-indulgent.
Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
Now, the Morrison government is continuing to face criticism over how it's handled the vaccine rollout and the latest outbreak, and one of those in the firing line is the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, who's been accused of abandoning his home state of Victoria and his electoral seat of Kooyong. For more, let's bring in live Sue Fricky from Voices of Kooyong. Sue, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Can you just firstly explain what Voices of Kooyong is for those who may be unaware?
That's a great question. We are a group of... At the moment, we're a small group of people who are gathering together to raise up the opportunity for ordinary people around the Kooyong electorate to engage in political discussion. We are, designed and modelled on the Voices for Indi group, which successfully launched themselves in about 2012. And we really want to connect with the community, engage in conversation to understand what the desires, the values, the beliefs and the needs are of the Kooyong electorate, with the hope to amplify those voices back to our politicians so that they can, when they act on our behalf in Parliament, understand what we are looking for and what's important to us. So it's very much about grassroots democracy.
What actually are some of the issues you have with the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, the fact of the matter is that when Josh was elected, he goes to federal parliament to make decisions in our name. And I know that the people of Kooyong, the electorate is changing, the demographics are changing. People are very concerned about climate action. People are very concerned about the treatment of women. People are very concerned about the treatment of our aged care facilities, the NDIS, and preserving its integrity. These are all issues that the people of Kooyong are looking for to be handled appropriately through Josh Frydenberg. But what we see in practice is that he votes along party lines, and in actual fact, side by side, votes exactly the same as Craig Kelly. So what we see in practice is our federal representative not delivering on the beliefs, the values and the wishes of this electorate, which is changing, and we really want a much better level of representation than what we're getting.
Now, you say on your website that you believe the two-party system is not working for Kooyong. Do you think it's actually possible to have an independent or minor party candidate win the seat, especially one a bit more progressive than Labor in what is considered to be a pretty conservative, safe seat?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I mean, obviously the reason why the two-party system continues to kind of chug along in Australian democracy and why the Kooyong federal seat is considered to be so safe is that, by and large, I think the electorate is somewhat disengaged with the political process. We are served up dishes of, unbelievably bad behaviour, corruption and lies, and the easiest thing to do is to turn off from the conversation. But I think that just lets the parties roll on and do what they've always done because we don't pay attention and hold them to account. And I do think that a strong independent candidate with the support of a Voices group and with an engaged community can get actually behind an independent candidate and actually make a difference. The seat is marginal now, we think. The Labor Party doesn't agree with us, but it only needs about 5,000 votes to swing the election away from the Liberal Party, primary votes to swing away from the Liberal Party, and I think that's absolutely a gettable thing.
Now, we often talk about pandemic governments and how every state government that has had an election here in Australia since the pandemic began has been re-elected. Do you think that could actually help Josh Frydenberg and keep him as the member for Kooyong?
Oh, look, I understand your point, and when you see what's happening in practice, the state government was re-elected in Tasmania, for example. So I think at a state level, it's fair to say that holds true, but I actually think there's a growing level of awareness about the federal government's overall incompetence, particularly as it pertains to the vaccine rollout. Their absolute delay and diversion away from delivering appropriate quarantine facilities, and continuing to be divisive and unsupportive of the states and really delegating or abdicating responsibility to the National Cabinet for key decisions you'd expect from a federal government. I just don't think that the history that we've seen at a state level will repeat at a federal level.
Just finally, there is a lot of speculation on social media, so I would love to get your thoughts on it before we go. Do you think we could ever see Prime Minister Josh Frydenberg?
Oh gosh, wow. I would have to be only a crystal, like a fortune teller with a crystal ball to say that. I'm pretty sure Josh would be ambitious enough, but I'm not entirely sure he has the right qualities to be the Prime Minister of Australia. But I guess what we don't ever know is what goes on in the back rooms. It certainly wouldn't be an outcome I'd be personally all that thrilled with, but you just never know, right?
There have been 6 p.m. since I was born, 7 if you include Rudd twice, so it's always a possibility.
I do think that a leadership spill and a rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic would not be a good thing for the federal government at this point in time. I think it would only emphasise to the electorate the failings that they've had with the leadership that they've got. And I think it would make it even harder for them to win at a federal election should they take that action now. But who knows, right? It's all a mystery.
Guess we'll have to wait and see. Sue Fricky from Voices of Kooyong, thanks very much for joining us live tonight.
Thank you, Leah.
All right, and of course, we want to know what you think about this story. Join the conversation in the comments below by using hashtag 6newsau, or you can now email us, contact@6newsau.com. Overseas now, and COVID cases and deaths are slowly beginning to rise once again across the US. New mask restrictions have been imposed by some states and counties, with Florida, Nevada and Arkansas seeing some of the largest rise in infections, including of the Delta variant, which of course, as we told you earlier this month, is now the prominent virus strain in America. But doctors are warning that this could all be prevented if more people got the jab, with a large number of people in hospital unvaccinated. US correspondent Jackson Gosnell has the details.
Leo, a lot happening here in the United States as it relates to the coronavirus pandemic. As you know, vaccine rollout was really strong. However, now vaccination numbers are continuing to go downward. Less people are willing to get the shot. A poll that I read earlier today suggests that about 80% of those who have not gotten the vaccine say they never plan to get it, or at least not for a very long time. Vaccine hesitancy is a concern in the United States. Less people are willing to get the shot due to some of the side effects that are rare but notable, including but not limited to some heart inflammation problems, as well as potential paralysis in one of the shots. A lot of side effects. So there is reason to be concerned, and it is understandable why less people are getting the shot. However, health officials continue to push the message that any risk associated with vaccinations are outweighed by the benefits of getting those vaccines. President Biden and the White House really hoping for more. Today, I learned that my state has about half of their people with at least one dose of a coronavirus vaccine. It's unclear how much longer until more of the state gets vaccinated, but I do know that testing is ramping up due to the Delta variant, obviously, which is causing more and more concerns. Many health officials say this is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated. There are breakthrough cases with those who have been vaccinated who are still getting the virus. However, their symptoms are much less than those who were unvaccinated in most cases. We do know that cases have been up since about February, or to where they would have been in about February. So cases are high again. I spoke with someone earlier in the week who works at a COVID testing site. They told me that they're seeing more and more people out there. But in my state and in many other states, there is no planned lockdown again. And really, to be frank with you, I want to let you know that a lot of people here in the United States are kind of dropping the fear. Those who've been vaccinated feel like they're protected, they can continue life. Those who are unvaccinated, in many cases, feel like they have accepted the risk. They know that they could be seriously ill or even die if they get the virus because they don't want the shot. And so I guess a lot of people are just making their own decisions and coming to terms with the decisions they're making, and the world, or the United States, really is kind of just moving forward. But in any event, vaccines are down, cases are up. Health officials say it's a huge problem. We hope we're not headed into a lockdown. Many officials say that won't happen because they won't do it, but we'll have to see what happens. I'll stay on top of it for you and bring you the very latest from right here in the U.S. I'm Jackson Gosnell. Back to you.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a surprise visit to Tibet, coinciding with the 70th anniversary of the agreement that secured China's so-called liberation of the region. The president's visit was only made public after he went back to Beijing because of an apparent security risk, with observers telling the ABC that the lack of media coverage from state-run outlets showed it was still a sensitive issue. Now, on the subject of China, we've seen a few comments from people who watched the Olympics opening ceremony and were confused as to what Chinese Taipei is. Well, to clarify, that is the name Taiwan. Competes Sunday in some international events. Other times it has just been the Republic of China, but no, that is Taiwan. Meanwhile, 7,000 kilometres away, there's a 500-strong group of Aussie athletes with the hopes of a nation on their shoulders. The Olympics are now underway in Tokyo, but back home excitement is building for another reason. Confirmation from the IOC that Brisbane will host the 2032 Olympic Games. Chief reporter Connor 4K has the latest on the ground.
Well, you might be able to see the copious cranes in the skyline behind me. Welcome to Brisbane, a city under construction as it is transformed into the 2032 Olympics host. The decision handed down by the IOC Wednesday night was met with little surprise but much celebration from locals.
I mean, it's a great opportunity for Brisbane. I'm excited even though it's quite a while away, and it's a great achievement for the city.
So are you guys excited that the Olympics are coming to Brisbane in 11 years?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm really excited.
Why are you excited?
Because it means if I can get real good at my sport, then I can compete in front of a home crowd.
What sport do you play?
I play hockey. Well, it's very great to have this Olympic here in Brisbane. Like, for me, this is very new. Like, to have the Olympics here in Australia and in Brisbane and our city, like, this is the best.
The news catapulting a little-known city onto the world stage.
Australia will host the Olympics for the third time as Brisbane was formally awarded hosting rights for the 2032 Games.
They sold Brisbane to the IOC with this ad. These attractions and the promise of a low-cost and sustainable Games in Queensland. Melbourne 1956, Sydney 2000. This decision makes Brisbane the nation's third Olympic city. Only 3 countries have managed to pull off such a feat. Thomas Bach said it was Australians' passion and love for sport that swayed the IOC. But Brisbane was actually the only bidder for the 2032 Games. It's thought budget blowouts and minimal economic benefits may have deterred some countries. Nevertheless, the Prime Minister says the Games will provide $18 billion in economic and social benefits to the nation. But costs are still being worked out, according to Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. But authorities insist it's construction that's needed, not just for the Olympics, but for a population that's predicted to grow by 1.5 million people over the next 2 decades. Some experts are expecting a boost to jobs, property prices and wages. This as the 32nd Olympiad gets underway in less than ideal conditions. First, a pandemic, then predictions of a typhoon and tropical storm in Tokyo this weekend. In recent days, the city has seen a spike in cases, recording its highest daily totals in 6 months. Now, it may be a little premature to start the countdown for Brisbane 2032. There are 4,016 days to go, Leo.
Now, if you're not an Olympic viewer and prefer to tune into one of the other commercial networks here in Australia, you might notice a surprising lack of coverage of the Games, and that's all due to copyright issues with the IOC. Now, non-rights broadcasters are only permitted to use 6 90-second blocks of Olympics footage per day. No more than 30 seconds of a single event can be included within that. Now, a top right credit must also appear on screen for exactly 5 seconds with the words courtesy of 7 Network, with 7's watermark not able to be obscured or blurred in any way. No footage can be used after 48 hours of an event's conclusion. No footage of previous Olympic Games can be shown, and any footage recorded within an Olympic venue is subject to those guidelines I just read out. Now, rights surrounding the actual Olympics logo and the rings are also tough, with many networks not able to use them in full screen. Now, for example, here's what Channel 9 has been doing, opting for stripes, and over at Channel 10 they've been using the Olympic colours but not the actual logo. On streaming services, it's also another debacle. Some networks are opting not to show news bulletins that contain the footage, while others have been given permission from 7. Sources tell 6 News that 9 will only be using IOC footage in their main 6 p.m. bulletin and not during any daytime or late night programs. Now, for those of you interested, here at 6 News, we are also unable to use the Olympics footage. Now, that's mainly due to copyright takedowns on platforms like YouTube and Facebook. We will, of course, do our best to keep you informed with the Games. And now is Ivan and Sarah with look what's coming up later tonight on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Coming up on WAMN News, COVID ship limbo. Unions express concerns over seafarers' welfare as BBC California remains in need. An exclusive interview.
Also this week, charges dropped by police over an unnecessary violent home arrest.
Advocates demanding state government to increase nursing workforce immediately.
And on Western Perspective, what's the hold-up on Australia's vaccination speed? Plus, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Right, thanks both Ivan and Sarah there. Now tomorrow's forecast right across the country. Brisbane partly cloudy, top of 21, 18 in Sydney, 10 degrees in the nation's capital, 16 in Melbourne, 12 in Hobart, cloudy and 18 in Adelaide, 16 in the top end, not the top end, the centre of Australia, Alice Springs, 19 in Perth, and in the actual top end, Darwin, a warm top of 33. And finally tonight, just a quick announcement about us, and I know we've been doing this for a few weeks now, but I can confirm that we are going to have a Q&A video in the next few weeks, so of course we need some questions from all of you. Now, we have a Google form where you can put all and any queries about the past, present and future of 6 News, not just myself, because there is a team of 8, including myself, but we want you to put all of them in, Now, the link to that is on our website. The form will be closing in the next few days, so get them in as soon as possible. We will do our best to read all of them out. If they're a bit too personal or off topic or just spam, we're of course not going to read them, but I'm sure 95% or more will be read out. You can leave your name. We aren't seeing your name, but you can leave your name if you want, and we will of course do our best. So that video should be coming out sometime in about mid-August if everything goes to plan. And that is 6 News for this Sunday evening. You can stay up to date with the latest headlines by heading to our website 6newsau.com and following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok and Lit. Just search 6 News AU to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.